Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. Hello, how are you?
Hey, Thomas, how are you?
Good. We are live, but no attendees have signed in yet. You should be able to mute and unmute yourself at will.
Yes.
Um,
I just want to make sure y'all could hear me okay.
yes. Sounds good, and video looks good. Tracy's joining, and Erica is going to be. Um, you're also a panelist right now, too.
Excellent. Do y'all want my camera off when I'm not presenting, or do you want me on camera the whole time?
Totally up to you.
Oh,
It's 90 minutes, so you know.
it's a long time.
I'm
All right, I
going to be
will.
sharing the slides, so I won't have my camera on.
Perfect. Okay. I'll do whatever y'all want me to do.
Hello.
Hello. All the panelists are on. Still no attendees yet. I'm just going to share the slide. And can you see the slides?
Yes.
Great.
All right. Can you see me?
No, I can't.
I just said a whole lot of words. I'm seeing your slides in presenter mode. So like I can see all the slides in like the notes section. So I don't know if you want to swap your view.
Yes.
Did you get a haircut?
I did. Oh
I'm
my God,
trying
videos on.
to show my, how do I show?
Okay, what about now? Does that
That looks
just show
good,
slides?
Thomas. Yep,
Okay.
looks perfect.
Okay, I'm trying to show my camera, but it's not showing. Hmm. All right, can you see me now?
No.
Okay, what about now?
Yeah.
Okay, how I do on the screen? Okay. On your screen. I didn't want to cover the logo. That's good. Or should it be just, that's fine. Oh. Hello, everyone. We'll begin shortly. Hello, hello, welcome. Welcome, welcome. We'll begin in about roughly 5 minutes. Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin in 3 minutes. Hello, welcome, welcome. We'll begin in 1 minute. Thank you for joining. Okay, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us and being interested in ServDC's Americorps State Formula Grant Competition. I am pleased to introduce Director Alexis L. Squire, ServDC's Chief Service Officer. Director Squire is a leader in volunteerism, partnerships, and grant making. Director Squire.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Tracy, for that warm welcome. And good afternoon to our attendees and Elisa and our partners at ASK. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. This is an exciting day, an exciting opportunity. We are bringing forth with you, to you and with you, our formula, our state formula application that is already live and on our website. But really, I get a lot of, Tracy mentioned that I am a partner, right? And I'm in community with other partners and nonprofit communities. And the number one question that we receive at Serve is how can we create more capacity? How can we have more resources? And so we are really excited to share more with you today about our formula grant application. And we think that it is a prime way for you to create capacity within your organizations through service, which is something that is near and dear to us as well. And so I'm excited for you to learn all of the engaging information about Americorps. This is a program that we are inspired by. We are inspired by new leadership within Americorps and where they're headed. And so we are excited to really bring forth this version of this application season through our formula grant process. We are also excited on behalf of Mayor Bowser to have the opportunity through our formula grant making to really address the needs that are here within the District of Columbia. And many of you that are on this call are doing the work, so you know it, but we are excited to be able to address housing insecurity and food insecurity, education, and all of the other focus areas. But this year, we are also excited to add to that list of focus areas, gun violence prevention. And so it is our hope that we will have applicants and nonprofits that address each of those focus areas to join us today and to also submit applications. You will learn from my team how easy and accessible it is for you to be able to do so. And just wanting to let you know that we are a resource for you. If you have questions outside of this information session, please, contact Tracy and her team. We'd be happy to support you as you assess if this is a good fit for you. If you know other organizations that are, in need of additional capacity, or if you think this might be a good model for them, please share this session. I'm sure we will share how to do that. But also, please let them know that Serve DC is here to connect with them and help them in any way that we can. We had a Serve 202 session this morning around how to recruit and retain volunteers of color, which was really dynamic. And so then this afternoon, we're having this info session. So we are really engaged with our constituents, with our residents, with our neighbors, with our nonprofit partners, and excited to do so. Thank you so much again to Tracy and our team, to Ask and to Americorps for their ongoing partnership. And we look forward to connecting with you and having you as a grantee. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Director Squire. So my name is Tracy Rawlings-Johnson, the National Service Officer here at Serve DC. My colleagues, Erica Wilson-Wells, Serve DC's Grant Management Specialist, and Elisa Gleason from America's Service Commission, ASK, will be presenting the FY22 Americorps State Formula Grant Competition application process for all applicants. All participants' lines will be muted. Please ask questions at any time during the presentation by using the chat box. At the end of the presentation, we will take a moment to answer all questions. Today's presentation will be recorded and posted on Serve DC's YouTube channel. You can find this presentation along with FAQs on the Serve DC's website. Serve DC would like to know who's joining the webinar today. Please use the chat box to put your name, the name of your organization, and the award where your organization will serve. Session objectives. In today's session, we will break down the application components that you will need to write in your application and how to submit your application. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in the chat box and we will have an opportunity to address them at the end of the presentation. We will cover the following objectives: the history of national service, Americorps, what is it? Who is Serve DC? What Americorps programs do? Who are Americorps members? Member terminology, application and review process, application expectations and scoring, best practice in demonstrating evidence, best practices in budget development, submitting your application in Egrants, prohibited activities, process and deadlines, and resources. The history of national service. President Bill Clinton signed the National and Community Service Trust Act of 1993, creating Americorps, previously known as the Corporation for National Community Service, or CNCS, Americorps and state service commissions to expand opportunities for Americans to serve their local communities. Next slide. Americorps, what is it? Americorps is the federal agency tasked with elevating service and volunteerism in America. The federal grant-making agency, created in 1993 by the National and Community Service Trust Act, signed by President Clinton, the nation's largest grant-maker service for volunteering. Americorps programs offer more than 75,000 opportunities a year for adults of all ages and backgrounds to serve through a network of partnerships with local and national nonprofit groups. And Senior Corps engages Americans ages 55 and older in meaningful service to the community. Who is ServDC? State service commissions are the state partners of the federal agency Americorps. ServDC is the state service commission on national and community service for Washington, D.C., one of more than 52 state service commissions that administers federal Americorps annual grant competition that awards funding to Americorps state and other community service programs and coordinates national service initiatives in the district. ServDC is the district government agency dedicated to promoting service as the way to address critical community needs. ServDC Commission determines social needs, set policies and program priorities, provide training and technical assistance, support National Day of Service, and promote service and volunteering in the district. Americorps funding opportunity. This funding opportunity is for Americorps programs proposing to place Americorps members in service solely in Washington, D.C. Eligible organizations must submit an application by the deadline to support an Americorps program at their organization. The Americorps grant includes funds to support the operation of the program. Americorps members positioned to support the proposed program goals. It is the responsibility of the organization to design the program using Americorps members. It is also the organization's responsibility to recruit, select, train, and place Americorps members in their programs. Americorps programs eligibility requirements. The following non-federal entities, all of which are identified on page 8 in the NOFO, are eligible to apply. Indian tribes, institutions of higher education, local governments, nonprofit organizations, and states. Entities must have a valid SAM registration and DUNS and/or unique entity identifier to receive an award. 2022 Americorps funding priorities. Americorps state and national aims to focus grant making in the areas identified by the Service America Act: disaster services, economic opportunity, education, healthy futures, veterans and military families, rural intermediaries, faith-based organizations, COVID-19 relief, and racial inequity. (2022) ServDC focus areas and priorities. ServDC program development priorities add to or complement the Americorps priorities. efforts to help local communities respond to and recover from COVID-19 pandemic, racial inequity, gun violence prevention, education, economic opportunity, healthy futures, and capacity building. You can find more information about each of these focus areas in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Please review it carefully. What Americorps programs do. The purpose of Americorps is to engage Americorps members in direct service and capacity building to address unmet critical community needs by recruiting Americorps members and managing volunteers. Americorps members teach, tutor, and mentor youth, clean parks and streams, build affordable homes, and much, much more. In your application, you will define the activities that your Americorps members will perform. Americorps terms and concepts. An Americorps program is an organization that has received Americorps and operates a service program. A grantee is a direct recipient of grant funds. A single state is an Americorps program operating solely within one state. This program receives an Americorps grant from a state service commission. And service locations are places in the community where members complete their service activities. Who are Americorps members? Organizations will design a recruitment and selection process to identify and enroll Americorps members for their Americorps program. Americorps members must meet specific eligibility criteria. U.S. citizens, U.S. national or local permanent residents of the United States, at least 17 years of age, no age limit, no upper age limit, high school graduates or education recipients, and subject to a criminal history check. Members are not volunteers or employees. Some members receive a living allowance, health insurance, and child care assistance. Americorps members receive the Siegel Education Award upon completing their term of service. Members sign a service agreement with the program. Members must be supervised. Members must be provided with program-specific training, and members must commit to a defined term of service. Program activities. Americorps members cannot engage in prohibited activities. What can be done with Americorps? Activities that staff, members, and volunteers may not engage in while charging time to Americorps program. Accumulating service or training hours or otherwise performing activities supported by the Americorps program. These are political activities and advocacy, religious activity, benefiting for profit entities, voter registration, and abortion services. So now I would like to turn it over to Elisa from AS. Elisa?
Thank you, Tracy. My name is Elisa Gleason, and I am with America's Service Commissions, or ASC, and we are the association that helps to support state service commissions like Serve DC. So I'm very excited to be here with you all today to share a little bit about their funding opportunity and a little bit more about the Americorps program. And I think I have my video started, so hopefully y'all can see me. So We wanted to talk a little bit about just the Americorps program structure itself and recognize that some of these terms that you're reading about in the notice and hearing about with Americorps are unique to the Americorps program, and so you may not have familiarity with them. So the first term that we wanted to help identify is MSY, or Member Service Year. This is something you'll see throughout the NOFO and application instructions. And one MSY is equal to one full-time equivalent Americorps member position. You can kind of think of an MSY as meaning like an FTE, if you will. You'll also hear a phrase in the notice called a cost per MSY. So oftentimes when you hear about this new funding opportunity that's available, you may be thinking, gosh, that's great. I want to know how much money can I ask for? And with the Americorps program, the way that you can identify how much money that you can request is based on this calculation called a cost per MSY. So the cost per MSY is what is simply a calculation, and it's used to indicate the maximum amount of federal funds that can be requested for your Americorps program or project. So the way that you'll figure out what your cost per MSY is you take the total amount of federal dollars that are being requested in your program or your grant application, divide that by the total number of MSYs being requested, and what you get is a cost per MSY. So if you want to know how much you can request, you can work this calculation backwards by taking the maximum cost per MSY, multiplying that by the number of MSYs you plan to request, and that will give you a total grant amount that you can request on your grant budget. So there is also a maximum cost per MSY. So again, the Americorps program isn't going to tell you, hey, you can request $500,000 or you can request $1 million. What they're going to do is give you a maximum cost per MSY that you can request. And the maximum cost per MSY is going to be dependent on the type of application that you're submitting to Serve DC. So there are a couple different grant types, and we'll cover them on the next slide. But these grant types are cost reimbursement, fixed amount, professional core, and education award program. And so for the cost reimbursement and fixed amount grant, the maximum cost per MSY is $21,600. If you're planning to apply with a professional core grant, your maximum amount of cost per MSY is $1,000. And if you're planning to submit an application as an education award program grant, your maximum cost per MSY is $800. So use this information as you identify how much funding you can request for your Americorps program. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the different grant types that you all have the ability to apply for. So the most traditional grant type is called a cost reimbursement grant. And I'll just say for all of these grant types, programmatically, the requirements, the expectations of you as an Americorps program are going to be identical. They're going to be exactly the same. The difference or the distinction in these grant types is solely based on the budget and the expectations from a budget or financial perspective. So a cost reimbursement grant type is going to be one where you're submitting an application that includes a detailed Americorps budget with showing all the line items. So things like programmatic costs, salary, fringe, travel, training, all of your Americorps member support costs, so living allowance, health insurance, FICA, operational costs, and then administrative costs. With a cost reimbursement grant, there is also a match that is required, and we'll cover that in a future slide, but there is a match required for the cost reimbursement grant. With a fixed amount grant, it may seem appealing because there's officially no formal match that's required with this grant. However, the amount of money that you receive to support the program is significantly less than what it will actually take to run the program. So while a formal match is not required, your organization is still going to be required to support it financially, support the program financially. The other difference with a fixed amount grant is that you are not submitting to Serve DC a detailed budget. You submit a fixed amount request. So that means you're going to receive a lump sum payment, and how you choose to spend that funding is up to you, essentially, in what way makes sense to best support the Americorps program. How you are reimbursed, unlike with a cost reimbursement program where you spend the money, you get reimbursed the funds, with a fixed amount program, the way that you request reimbursement is by enrolling Americorps members and then retaining those Americorps members. So if you have no experience of being in an Americorps program, oftentimes we'll encourage you to go with a cost reimbursement grant first, so that you can get some experience with enrolling and retaining Americorps members before you would make a switch over to having a fixed amount grant, and maybe having a strong history of enrollment and retention. The professional core program is a subtype of a fixed amount program, where you're going to be categorized as a professional core program if your program's activities are to place Americorps members as professionals in a professional type setting, where there is an inadequate number of such professionals. So I think one of the easiest examples to share is teachers. And so if you have a district or school system with a limited or a lack of professional teachers to be placed as in those districts, then if you have a teacher program coming in and placing Americorps members as teachers in those schools where there is a documented lack of such professionals, then that program would be considered a professional core program. And then finally, an educational award program. Again, programmatically is going to be the same as any other grant type, but with an education award program, you're receiving a very nominal amount of money. You saw on that last slide, it's $800 per MSY. And with the education award program, you would receive funds based solely on enrolling Americorps members. There's not that additional component of also needing to retain the members to receive funding as well. So those are the grant type options that are available to you through this opportunity. Some additional terminology. You've heard Tracy and Alexis mention, this is not just a grant opportunity. This is an Americorps program. And what makes this program unique is that you all are proposing not only programmatic activities, but you're proposing these activities to be conducted with folks called Americorps members. And so these Americorps members are going to be individuals that your organization recruits, trains, places, supports, supervises throughout the duration of the Americorps grant. And as part of that, there are these additional terms that go along with these folks who we call Americorps members. So Americorps members have an opportunity to serve either in a full-time or a part-time position with your organization. You can design an Americorps program that utilizes any of these Americorps member types that makes the best sense for your organization. You may have an organization that has all full-time members, or you may have a program that has some full-time members, but maybe some quarter-time members, right? So you all have a lot of flexibility in designing and developing an Americorps member that's going to best suit your needs. So you can see from the chart here that there are seven Americorps member types. They range in service type hours. So the full-time Americorps member is going to be expected to serve 1,700 hours during their term of service. A three-quarter member will serve 1,200 hours. Half-time will serve 900. Reduced half-time 675. Quarter-time 450. Minimum time 300. And an abbreviated time member will serve 100 hours. So again, you all, as you're designing your program, want to take a look at a calendar, right? Take a look at a calendar, see what the expectations are for the service activities that you're proposing for that person to serve, and then figure out what member type is going to make the best sense. You can see in the second column here an MSY value. So as you're calculating, how much money you're going to receive, how many MSYs are you proposing, use this column to see exactly how many MSYs in total you're planning to request for your grant. The fourth column here is talking about living allowance. So the living allowance is a stipend that a full-time AmeriCorps member will receive in equal increments during their term of service. The living allowance is something that is paid out to all members of the same type in equal increments, regardless of the number of actual hours served during that pay period. And so that's something to be aware of, is that this is an allowance amount. It's a stipend. It is not an hourly wage. It is not tied to the actual hours that the person is serving. It is to be seen as a stipend. Full-time members are required to receive a minimum living allowance amount. Any other AmeriCorps member type 3/4 time to abbreviated time is absolutely allowed to receive a living allowance amount. There's just no mandated minimum amount that they are required to receive. You can see in that last column that there are maximum living allowance amounts. And so if your organization does plan to provide an individual with a living allowance, you want to make sure that you're adhering to those maximum living allowance amounts, unless you are a professional corps program, in which case you all are not required to adhere to those maximum living allowance amounts. The other kind of bullet point on this slide is talking about the Americorps Education Award. So as I believe Tracy mentioned, there is the benefit of receiving an education award at the conclusion of or the successful completion of a term of service. Those education award amounts vary by the type of member's term. So the most money goes to a full-time member, the least amount goes to an abbreviated time member. These education award amounts are not to be included on the grant budget that you are designing or developing for your program. The education award amounts are paid directly from the National Service Trust to the AmeriCorps member's loan holder, college, or educational institution. And so the ServDC and your AmeriCorps program will never touch that money. It goes straight from the National Service Trust to the AmeriCorps members' loan holder educational institution. So it's a great benefit for members, but it's not something that you all need to account for as you're developing your AmeriCorps budget. The next slide is going to talk about those match requirements. So all AmeriCorps programs are required to provide a match as part of this program. Your match can be made up of actual cash, it can be in-kind resources, it can be from federal sources or non-federal sources. So you have a lot of flexibility in what is used to support the matching requirement. There is a graduated scale of match that increases over time. So if you are a brand new organization that has not previously had an AmeriCorps program, your match for next year is going to be at 24%. So you will need to make sure that as you're doing the math on your budget, that you're matching 24% of your total project cost. That 24% match is required for the first 3 years that your program is in operation. And then beginning in year 4, that match rate will begin to increase, where it will eventually cap out at 50% in year 10, and it will remain at 50% for any years past 10 that you remain in an AmeriCorps program. There are some limited opportunities for an adjusted match schedule. And so if that's something that you think your organization might be eligible for, you can read about that in the notice of funding opportunity. And so the next thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was just about program development. So as you are completing your AmeriCorps program application for the 22-23 AmeriCorps program year, we just wanted to kind of cover what kind of timing you should be thinking about. So the AmeriCorps program is one where you'll hear terms like project period, budget period, member term of service. And so it's important for you to kind of understand how those align or fit together. So with the Americorps program, when you're submitting a brand new application, you're doing so discussing or describing activities in a need that will essentially span a 3-year project period. However, you are submitting a budget that will include costs only for a 1-year or 12-month budget period time. So as you're kind of talking about the overall purpose of your program and the things you're hoping to accomplish, you'll do so kind of talking about that in a 3-year period of time. But for the actual budget, the Americorps program works on a 1-year time frame where you will submit a 12-month budget, and you will also include performance measures that are also reflective of that 1-year period of time. You will also request Americorps members on a 1-year period of time as well. So if you're expecting a project where over the course of 3 years you have 30 Americorps members, for year 1, you're just going to request the 10 members. Then next year, you'll request 10 more members. And then the final year, you'll request 10 more members, right? So you'll only be requesting what you propose to spend, what you propose to accomplish, and the Americorps members you propose to place in service during the 2022-2023 program year, which is going to be a 1-year or 12-month period of time. All of the Americorps members that you're requesting through this grant opportunity that you're proposing to place in service will have a start and end date that occurs sometime between the start and end date of your Americorps budget period, 12-month period of time. Typically, Americorps program budget periods will start either August 1st, September 1st, October 1st, and your Americorps members will serve terms of service within that period of time. You want to make sure that you're setting a term of service for Americorps members that makes sense based on the service that they're performing. And we'll talk about this a little bit on the next slide. But you also want to, again, get out that calendar and make sure that you're allowing sufficient time for Americorps members to earn or serve the minimum number of hours for the term that you're proposing for them. So for those of you who like pictures, we've tried to show this on this slide. So on this slide, and I'll just kind of describe what you're seeing here. If this is the first time that you are proposing an Americorps program to serve DC, you are going to be submitting a new application. This application is going to be for a 1-year, 12-month period of time. That is going to be your budget period. In my example here, I have a budget period of going from September 1st, 2022, all the way to August 31st, 2023. So this is going to be the budget period for when your grant program is active, when you are able to spend money, incur costs, all within that budget period window, not before and not after. Within that budget period, then, your Americorps program will define when you want Americorps members to be serving. Say, for example, you are an education program that wants members to start serving at the beginning of the school year. You may set a full-time members term of service to begin September 19th within that September 1st budget period start date time, right? You want to think about the calendar of the school year. Maybe school ends for you towards the end of the year, and so you're going to set your full-time members term of service to end on May 19th, 2023. You've taken into account school holidays, school breaks, folks just needing a day to themselves, right? And you know that if you start them September 19th and end them on May 19th, they will have sufficient opportunity to serve 1,700 hours. If they don't, maybe look at a 3/4 time member, right? Then say, for example, your education program has a summer programming opportunity. And so you're going to start minimum time members on May 22nd, and you're going to end them on August 18th. That's going to be your program design. And so again, you have set 2 different member terms of service to occur between September 1st and August 31st, inclusive of that budget period timeframe. Then if you are going to continue on as an Americorps program, you'll submit a new request next year. That's going to be part of your continuation application. The third year, you'll have another continuation application. And then if things go well and you want to keep the Americorps program going, you'll submit a recompete application to go into year 4. And the cycle will just continue on. So hopefully this slide is helpful, a helpful visual to kind of see how all of these various pieces fit together. So I think that is where I'm stopping and turning things back over to Tracy.
Yay! Thank you, Elisa. Now we'll walk you through the application and review process. The application narratives consist of these fields. All the narrative fields must be completed and will be assessed to determine your application score. As you can see, the program design makes up 50% of your overall score. Organization capability, cost effectiveness, and budget adequacy both make up 25% each. Now let's go through the selection criteria that you will need to write in these narrative fields. The executive summary is the first narrative field, and it follows a template that you will need to fill in with information about your program design. When you complete the executive summary, be concise as possible. While this doesn't factor into your score, it does take up your page limit. The program design. Starting with the theory of change and logic model, the criteria for this section looks at both. You will describe your program's theory of change, addressing all criteria. The logic model is a separate component that will be scored on its completeness and its alignment with your theory of change as described in the narrative field. By alignment, I mean that the information in the logic model should be reflected in the narrative. Essentially, once the peer reviewers read the narrative, they should not be surprised by any of the information included in the logic model. We'll talk about the logic model during the next slide. For a quick review, the theory of change is how an intervention will create change. The 3 elements of a theory of change are the community problem need, program intervention, and the intervention's intended outcome. All 3 must be supported by data and evidence. The logic model is a visual representation of your program's theory of change and should give a clear overview of your program's intervention and intended outcomes. The logic model must include the following: a brief description of the community problem the program will address, the inputs, resources the program will leverage, the core activities provided by members, the outputs of those activities, and the short, medium, and long-term outcomes that occur as a result. Next is the evidence-based and quality evaluation section. Americorps requires that program interventions be supported by evidence. The evidence-based section is where you speak to the evidence that supports your program intervention. In this competition, evidence-based is scored on 2 parts: evidence tier and evidence quality. First, the applicant will be assigned to an evidence tier. Then, the quality of the applicant's evidence and the degree to which it supports the proposed program design will be assessed and scored. All applicants must include a description up to 2 research studies or evaluations in order to earn points, including the following information: the date of the research or evaluation was completed at the time period for which the intervention was examined, a description of the target population study, the methodology used in the study, a description of data source, and data collection methods, the outcomes or impacts examined and the study findings, the strength of the findings, and if the program is looking to implement an evidence-based intervention, they must explain how the intervention is going to be implemented with fidelity. Excuse me. Member experience. It is important that Americorps members have a meaningful service experience. In this section, you will speak to the valuable skills and experiences that the members will gain from their service with your program. Address how you will recruit members from the geographic and demographic communities that you serve and how you foster an inclusive service culture. Organizational capability. For the organizational background and staffing, you must detail the roles, responsibilities, and structure for the staff that will be implementing the Americorps program, as well as providing oversight and monitoring for the program. You will also need to describe your organization's experience facilitating, partnering, or participating in educational or workforce development programs. You will also need to state your commitment and plan to advance diversity, equality, and inclusion through your organization's mission. For compliance and accountability, you must discuss your monitoring and oversight plan to prevent and detect non-compliance and enforce compliance with Americorps rules and regulations. You must describe your policies, procedures, and controls to prevent, detect, and mitigate the risk of fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. And you must also describe your organization's mechanisms to immediately report any suspected criminal activity, waste, fraud, and/or abuse, and your plan to train staff on these reporting protocols. For a culture that values learning, you must discuss how your board, management, and staff collect and use information, including performance data for learning and decision-making. You should also discuss how information is collected and used to determine the programmatic effectiveness of serving in a community with a diverse core of members. For member supervision, you must discuss how Americorps members will receive sufficient guidance and support from their supervisor to provide effective service, and how Americorps supervisors will adequately train, prepared to follow Americorps and the program regulations, priorities, and expectations. The next few slides, Elisa will go over the budget development and performance measures. Elisa?
Thank you, Ms. Tracy. So with budget development, this is, I think, the fun part of the grant application, because in the actual narrative field, you're literally going to write the words "see budget." So there's not anything that you're going to be asked to describe or talk through. You're really, the focus here and the points that you'll receive for the application purposes are all going to be reflected in the actual budget document itself. So as ServDC is reviewing and assessing the budgets, they're going to be looking at things like, did you do your math correctly? You think, that's one that's an easy one, but there's, you all are going to be tweaking these budgets so much that mathematical errors will occur. And so if you have someone that you can send your budget to before you hit that final submit button, it's a great opportunity for them to just literally sit there with their calculator and just double check that your math is correct. They also want to make sure that you're proposing things in the budget that are allowable, reasonable, and allocable to the award. So what that means is that you're not, that, if this is your first time receiving a federal grant, there are certain things you can and can't pay for on the grant. An easy one that I think many of you all probably are familiar with would be alcohol, right? So you don't want to put on here, 10 cases of beer, it's going to be a great year, right? So that's going to be something that's unallowable, and they're going to be looking for things like that. They also are going to look to make sure that it's reasonable. Part of the way that the ServDC staff review applications is they'll start with the budget. They'll look to see, who are the staff that you're proposing to put on this budget? Based on the staff that are included, what assumptions can I make about the support this program has at the organization? What assumptions can I make about how the Americorps members are going to be supervised, right? They're also going to look to see, well, what have you put in the training costs? Can I expect that this program is going to sufficiently train site supervisors, sufficiently train Americorps members based on what I'm seeing in the budget itself? And then allocable to the award means you're not using this as an opportunity to go and support your entire organizational operations, right? Everything on the Americorps budget should go to supporting the Americorps program that you're proposing to have at your organization. If, for example, you need computers and you need to buy a new computers for the work that's going to be done at the program, but you are only proposing that, we're going to use these computers, we need them, we're going to use them 50% of the time for the Americorps program, and the other 50% of the time we're going to be using for our community outreach activities. Well, then if you're only using them 50% of the time for Americorps, then we would expect to see that they're on the budget at 50% of the cost, right? So that's what allocable means. We're going to make sure that you have submitted sufficient information. So when we look at the Americorps budget, there's a description opportunity. It has some character limits, but it still is sufficient opportunity for you to provide a full explanation of what's being proposed. So I should be able to look at your Americorps budget and know exactly what you're planning to pay for based on the description that you provide. So if you're saying travel, that's one way to say it, right? A better way would be airfare, one person, $300, lodging, 2 nights, one person, $200, per diem, $50, right? So what I'm getting when I have that more full description is a better understanding of where the money is actually going. So could I say travel? Sure. But I also could provide you with sufficient information of explaining exactly what I'm proposing to spend or pay for within that line item. So that's what we're going to be looking for. Are you fully describing what this budget line item is proposing to pay for? We're also going to be looking to make sure that you're meeting minimum match and that the budget is equal to or more than what's required for your program's year. So we went over that slide a few moments ago showing the expectations for match level. That's what they're going to be looking for. And then making sure that your cost per MSY is not exceeding the maximum cost per MSY for the application that you're submitting. Just a tip, the eGrants system where you'll submit your application and budget will allow your budget to go through if that maximum cost per MSY is exceeded. So you could put a budget through with a $30,000 cost premise Y. You're not going to get an error message. And so you want to make sure that you are really looking at it, that you are at or below the maximum cost premise Y before, again, you hit that submit button on your application. And then if you have full-time members, they're going to be looking to make sure that you've included living allowance. If you are proposing less than full-time members, they're going to be assessing the living allowance that you're providing or proposing to provide as well. Keep in mind that you do have to pay FICA, so that should be included as part of that living allowance cost as well. So when you go into eGrants and you look at the budget and you see how you're expected to reflect all of the costs, and y'all can go to the next slide, there are 4 primary sections of the Americorps budget. The first section relates to the program operational costs, staff salary, staff fringe, travel, training, supplies, equipment. All of those costs are going to be included under that section 1, program operating costs. Just a couple things to point out. Your Americorps staff that are included under that section 1 of the budget are expected to submit timesheets. They're also expected to keep timesheets rather. They're also expected to have a criminal history check done on them. So if you have an individual who does not want to do timesheets and who does not want to have a criminal history check, do not put that person on your Americorps budget, okay? With the other thing, you want to make sure you're including the costs of conducting those criminal history checks for all your staff that are in the budget and all of the Americorps member positions that are proposed. So that's another just check that the DC team is going to be looking at is, have you budgeted for national service criminal history checks? The other thing that they're going to be looking for is member service gear, right? Your Americorps members, per the terms and conditions of the Americorps program, are required to have Americorps service gear on every day that they're in service. And so, maybe you already have, a bunch of service gear and you can support your members that way, but maybe you need to buy some. And so making sure that that's included on your budget, or that you've described how that's going to be paid for outside of the budget. Member support costs, that's section 2 of the budget. That's going to be your living allowance, FICA on the living allowance, health insurance for full-time members, and then if you have any like an EAP program, that would be included in section 2 as well. Section 3 is the administrative or indirect costs of the supporting the program. The Americorps program allows for an automatic 5% indirect cost rate to be used on the CNCS share side of the budget and 10% automatic on the grantee share side. If your organization already has a federally approved indirect cost rate, then you are allowed to use that rate. You're expected to use that rate. You don't need to claim the full rate, but you're expected to use that rate. So you would be putting that in section 3 of the budget. And then the final section is a section called source of matching funds. This is just a chart where you're going to identify for the ServDC Commission where your matching sources are coming from. So even if you're a fixed amount grant, you need to provide information on to the Commission on how you're proposing to kind of come up with your portion of supporting the Americorps program. And so you can read more about all of the details of expectations on that in the grant application notice. But those are the things we wanted to point out on those sections. And then again, as you're looking at the Americorps budget, you've probably heard me mention this, it's divided into 2 columns, or actually, I guess 3 columns. The one column is called CNCS share. That column is the amount of federal funds that you're going to be requesting through this grant program. The second column is called grantee share, and that's either the amount or value that you're providing as match. And again, cash or in kind. And then there's a third column that's just the total, right? So CNCS share is the amount of federal funds you're requesting, grantee share is your portion, and then total, which just adds those 2 together. The next slide is just on performance measures. So performance measurement is something that you are going to identify targets for your Americorps members to work towards through this project on an annual basis. Performance measures are outputs and outcomes. All applicants are required to have one aligned performance measure that captures the primary service activity of your Americorps members. An aligned measure means that it has an output that then will lead to an outcome. So this is not your place to flood the application with performance measures. So your organization may be doing lots of really great stuff. Your Americorps members may be doing one main thing and lots of little things. The performance measures are not the place to capture all those little things. The performance measures are the place to say, what is the primary activity that my Americorps members are going to be doing? Most likely, you all will have one performance measure, maybe two performance measures. There are other ways and places for you to kind of highlight and identify some of the extra stuff your Americorps members are doing, not the performance measures. So the performance measures have a whole like section in the eGrants application, and you're going to identify your outputs, your outcomes, your targets for each of those, and how you're collecting data on that or plan to collect data. So outputs are just going to be a count of service that's provided. This is going to be measuring things like how many children were served, how many meals were served, how many houses were built, how many miles of trail were cleared, right? So it's just a count of things that were done. Then after that output comes an outcome. And what makes it aligned is that they connect together. So because you served these children, then what happened? What change occurred? So the outcome measures change that's occurred for either the individual, a community, an organization, or the environment. It is not a change in the Americorps member. It is a change that because the Americorps members did this service, because they were able to complete this output or this count, then what changed? So it's going to be a change in either belief, knowledge, skill, behavior, and typically this is going to be like a percentage. So for example, if you have an education program, you may have served 100 children. You're going to identify what served means, how many days per week, how many sessions, how intense is that service? And then the outcome will be something like 15% of your children, well, hopefully it's better than that. Maybe it's 75% of children that were served increase their reading level by 2% or by 1 grade level or something, right? So it's going to be that change. So that's what the outcome is on the performance measures. And again, you're going to set your targets on a 1-year period of time, not over that 3-year project period. And then the last thing I just want to point out on performance measures, don't propose a performance measure with data that you have no access to receive. So if you are proposing a performance measure that says, according to statewide data, we're going to change by 15%. If you don't have access to that statewide data, then don't include it in your performance measure. So make sure that whatever you're including in your performance measure, you actually have access to that data and you can collect it on your own, or that you've got an MOU or an agreement with an entity that has that data and is collecting it and is able to share that data with you. So with that, I'm now going to be turning things over to Miss Erica Wells.
Thank you, Elisa. I'm going to go over submitting your application in eGrants. I did notice in the chat there was a question about submitting to more than one location. You will only be submitting applications in eGrants this application cycle. As the slide says, we want you to start early, finish early, and submit early. So we're going to start early, finish early, and submit early. New and recompeting applicants, we're going to need you to have an eGrants account. We know if you are a current grantee, you have an eGrants account. If you do not currently have an eGrants account, there are steps to show you exactly how to do that. If you're currently in eGrants or you have an eGrant application, you go to the section to start a new grant application. You select a program area, which is Americorps, and then you select the NOFO, which is Formula for Serve DC 2022-2023. Your application should consist of the following components, and please make sure to complete each section in its entirety. Your applicant info, your application info. Please ensure you have your narratives, your logic model, your performance measures, your program information, backup documents, your budget, your funding and your demographics. Please review everything, authorize, and then submit. Process and deadlines. As many of you are aware, the NOFO hit the street on Tuesday, February 8th. Today is our technical assistance session, Wednesday, February 23rd. And the full applications are due in eGrants by Friday, April 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Once the applications are submitted, there will be a Serve DC clarification process from Monday, May 16th through May 27th. There will be a revised final application process in eGrants for everything to be submitted, all revisions by Monday, May 30th, 2020. And then by Wednesday, June 1st, we will look to have all completed formula packets to Americorps by close of business on June 1st. So it is a quick but steady timeline for those of us who are looking to compete or recompete for the formula funding. While the team has provided wonderful information, if you're looking for even more information, we have resources for you. You can sign up to Corporation for National and Community Service email list, which is cncs.nationalservice.gov. If you need assistance managing your Americorps grant, you can go on nationalservice.gov and look at Build Your Capacity for help in capacity building for your grant. Additionally, there are grant terms and conditions on nationalservice.gov under resources. There are GPR resources, which is your grant program reporting. Under nationalservice.gov, build your capacity. And lastly, there is a national service network, Americorps State and National Knowledge Network, which is at nationalservice.gov/resources/Americorps. You guys have any questions? I've seen a couple. If there are any more, please drop them into the chat. And if you have need of more detailed answers, please send your questions to Americorps@dc.gov.
So looking at the chat and want to make sure that we're addressing the questions that y'all have. The first question that came in is about whether this opportunity is for organizations looking to get Americorps members. Yes, That's what this opportunity is. So this opportunity, the Americorps program, is a funding opportunity, a federal funding opportunity, but it also includes the people to help you perform the service. And so this is not a grant opportunity where there are just funds
Elisa, I
provided
have
to
a question
organizations.
from the chat
Oh, yeah.
for you. It says, so this grant is specifically for organizations looking to get an Americorps member, or is there a component of the grant we can apply for if we already have an Americorps member?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I might have been on mute. So yes, so this opportunity is
You're muted,
for.
Elisa.
Actually, I think we can hear her.
Oh, thanks, Thomas. So yes, so this opportunity is not just for, this is not just funding. This is for both people and money to support the program activities that these people are going to be doing service in Washington, D.C. So this is not just a grant opportunity where you receive funds. This is where you receive funds to support a project, and that project uses people who are Americorps members in service throughout DC. The next question that I saw come through was about whether these folks are employees or if they are volunteers. And I completely get that question. This is a unique opportunity and sometimes one that is a kind of has elements of all of those things in it. But I will say that the regulations that started the Americorps program are very specific that the people serving as Americorps members are not employees. So they're not going to be considered employees of the organization, which is why they don't receive payment, right? They receive a stipend. And so they are not to be considered employees. They're like volunteers, but they're long-term volunteers because they are signing a service agreement with your organization. So you all will be developing member service agreements for these people who serve as Americorps members, and they're going to commit to that term of service. And so they're not just a volunteer. They're not just an employee. They're kind of a unique position, and they're called an Americorps member. And so as far as the question about liability insurance, I think that it's a great idea if you have liability insurance. Some commissions require it. I'm actually not familiar if DC requires organizations to have liability insurance, but you are required to have AD&D and or workers' comp on your for all your Americorps members. So all your Americorps members do need to have either AD&D or workers' comp. But as far as liability insurance, I think unless the commission specifically has chosen to require it, that would be at your discretion.
And I think we have one question. If an organization has already applied for a multi-state Americorps grant for DC and Maryland, but are still waiting to hear back, can they apply for this grant opportunity?
Yep. Yeah, so you can. So if you've already submitted a national application and you're anxiously awaiting that outcome, then you absolutely can submit an additional application directly to DC. Of course, the application would reflect just service within DC. It would not reflect any of that service or any of the Americorps positions that you had proposed for the Maryland locations. And then the other thing would be that if you are successful in your application at the national level that is inclusive of both DC and Maryland, then you would need to pull your DC application. So you cannot have two applications supporting the same service at the same place. So you'll just want to make sure that if you are successful nationally, you would just pull your Serve DC application.
And our next question is, does eGrants allow you to save information and continue at a later time?
It does, but eGrants, if you've ever worked in it before, can be a finicky system. And so what I would strongly recommend is developing a budget and creating your or drafting your application in like a Word document. And then when you are good with what your budget looks like, when you're good with your narrative application, then copying and pasting it over into eGrants. eGrants will let you save, but it can be a particular system. So the other thing to note, and you didn't ask this exactly, but the other thing to note about eGrants is that there is no formatting. So if this is the first time that you're submitting an application for the AmeriCorps program, or the first time you're using eGrants, you'll see in the notice that there are page limits that you have to adhere to. It's a challenge to check those page limits, because the only way to check them is to print your application and see how those pages print out. So again, and it's not a one-to-one conversion of what you do in Word, for example, and what you copy and paste over into eGrants. So just be aware of that you want to make sure you leave yourself some time to adjust to the page limits as needed. And eGrants will let you keep going. So eGrants will let you keep going, and you won't recognize that you've exceeded the page limits. You also can't format. So the way, what I would say is the best way to kind of highlight information would be to type anything in all caps. So if you are starting a new section in the eGrant system and you want to talk about member supervision, in all caps, type the words member supervision, enter, and then you can start with the narrative text. But there are no bullets, there's no italics, there's no bold, there's no opportunity to add pictures or graphs or charts or images. So, unlike a traditional just grant where you want to like really fluff it with formatting and pictures, this isn't going to be that opportunity. So make sure that you're aware of that as you're getting ready to submit your application as well.
You all will be excited to know that there are frequently asked questions or FAQs that will be uploaded to the ServDC website. Are there any additional questions for the chat?
I think I see one more. If an organization has a national application that's for a different program or a different scope than their DC-based application, could they receive 2 awards, one for DC and one national?
Yep, absolutely. So if you are proposing either a difference in location or a difference in scope, you'll want to make sure that it's pretty clear that it's different. But yes, you could receive both grants. The other thing that you want to just be aware of, lots of national organizations have both national and commission specific state grants. So it absolutely is something that's common and can be done. What I will caution is that you want to make sure that you have the capacity within your organization to make sure that you are tracking the activities grant by grant. So you want to make sure that you have the capacity internally to say, what are the targets, or what are the things that the members serving under this grant have accomplished versus another grant. So you want to make sure you have the capacity to track data that way. You also want to make sure that you're looking at your budget. And if you have, a program director, and you are a program director, but you're program director for all the work, and part of the work is one grant, part of the work is another grant, you want to make sure you have the capacity to allocate that staff member's time between the 2 program grants, so you're not either double counting on one grant budget over the other, but you want to make sure you're really keeping track of your systems that way. But yeah, it happens quite frequently. It's something that can be done.
So I'll pass it over to Tracy. I think those are all of our questions.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
And again, just email us at americorps@dc.gov, and those FAQs will be posted on our website. Tracy?
Okay, thank you. I hope that this presentation was informative. And again, thank you for being interested in Serve DC's Americorps State and Formula Grant competition, and good luck.
Bye.